If you've been keeping chickens for a few years and something feels off, the feed bill keeps climbing, you're losing birds to predators more than you'd like, and honestly the return just doesn't match the effort anymore. This video is going to feel very familiar to you. About a year ago, I made a decision I'd been putting off for 2 years. I got rid of my entire flock and replaced them with 4 completely different animals. Not because I read it in a book, because I was tired of a system that wasn't working for where I actually am and what I actually need. Today I'm showing you everything that happened. What worked better than I expected, what failed on me, and whether I would do it again. Stick with me, because the honest answer to that last question is more complicated than a simple yes or no. And if you're new here, this is the Animal and Plant Lost Vault. We dig into the animal and plant knowledge that most homesteading content skips right past. The practical stuff, the overlooked stuff, the stuff that actually moves the needle on a self-sufficient setup. Subscribe and hit the bell. I've got content coming that you're going to want to see before you make your next decision about your land. Now let me walk you back to where this started. I was running a mixed flock of 14 birds. I'd kept chickens for 5 years at that point, so this wasn't a beginner's frustration. This was someone who knew the system, had worked the system, and had slowly come to realize the system had some real cracks in it. The first problem was the feed bill. My monthly spend had crept up to between $40 and $50 just on feed, and the egg output I was getting back didn't justify that number anymore. Some months it came close, most months it didn't. Now I want to address something right away because I know what some of you are thinking. My chicken's free range and I barely spend anything on feed. And that's real. If you have the land layout and predator pressure is low, free ranging genuinely changes the economics. But that wasn't my situation, and based on the conversations I've had with people in this community, it's not most people's situation either. So I'm talking to the majority here, not the exception. The second problem was predators. I lost 9 birds in one 8-week stretch. I reinforced the coop twice, lost more birds, reinforced again. At some point you have to ask whether this is a fencing problem or whether this is simply an animal that is difficult to protect at scale on a smaller property. I came to believe it was both, and that the second part wasn't going to change no matter how much hardware cloth I added. The third problem was disease spread. When one bird gets sick in a tight flock, you are managing a crisis fast. I had a respiratory outbreak in year 3 that wiped out 1/3 of my birds before I got it under control. Chickens live close together by nature. That's a disease environment you're always managing against. And the fourth problem, the one I was slowest to admit, was that chickens were actively working against my garden. They scratched up my seed beds. They ate my young starts. Every time I tried to integrate them near the beds, I paid for it. So I sat down one evening with my notebook and my land map, and I asked myself a question I'd never seriously asked before. What does this property actually need? Not what every beginner homesteading book says to start with, not what my neighbor has. What does this specific land, with this specific climate, with my specific goals, actually need from the animals I keep? I needed pest control in the garden. I needed soil fertility. My beds were getting tired. I needed consistent protein output that was affordable to maintain. And I needed animals that would work with the plant systems I was building, not against them. I built a short list of 4 animals, each one chosen because it filled a specific gap the chickens were either leaving open or actively making worse. One more thing before we go further. You don't have to do all 4 of these to get value from this video. Some of you have a 1/4 acre, some of you have a backyard, some of you still have chickens and just want to know what else is possible alongside them. This isn't an all or nothing situation. Watch how each animal works, figure out what fits your setup, and build from there. That's honestly how I'd recommend approaching it. Now, let's get into the animals. The first animal I brought in was Muscovy ducks in early summer so I could see how they'd interact with the garden before I added anything else to the mix. If you've never kept Muscovies, they're unusual looking birds. Red-faced, heavy-bodied, and almost completely silent. No crowing, no constant noise. My neighbours never once mentioned the ducks across the entire year. For anyone keeping animals in a neighbourhood setting or on a smaller property, that matters more than people realise. But the reason I chose them specifically was their reputation as insect hunters. I had a slug problem in my raised beds that had been wrecking my brassicas for 2 seasons running. I tried diatomaceous earth, copper tape, the beer trap method. Nothing made a lasting difference. Within 6 weeks of the ducks free-ranging along the garden edge, the slug damage dropped noticeably. Not completely gone. I want to be clear about that. You'll still find slugs occasionally, especially after a heavy rain. But the level of damage that had been killing my brassica crop came down to something I could manage. The plants I'd been babying started actually producing. This is where things start to change. And it wasn't dramatic. It was gradual. But it was consistent. The first real challenge came around month 2. One of the ducks, the biggest female, figured out that the gap under my side gate was just wide enough. She escaped 3 times in 10 days. The 3rd time she made it to the road before I caught her. That was a stressful morning and a complete fencing failure on my part. I mention that because I think a lot of homestead transition videos edit out the fence failures and the scrambling and the early mornings where something has gone wrong before you've had coffee. That's real life, and if you're planning a switch like this, you need to budget time and energy for the setup period. Nothing runs smoothly from day 1. The fencing got fixed properly that time. By month 6, the ducks had found their routine. Feed costs were lower than any chicken I'd ever kept, partly because of how much they were foraging on their own. And the eggs. Muscovy eggs are richer than chicken eggs. Thicker yolk, better for baking, better for cooking. Once I started using them regularly, I stopped missing chicken eggs faster than I expected. I also started growing duckweed in a small water basin near their paddock. Duckweed is one of the most protein-dense plants you can grow per square foot. It doubles in mass every 24 to 48 hours in warm weather, and it costs almost nothing to establish. The ducks ate it daily. It cut my feed spending further and connected directly into the plant side of this whole system, which is something I'll come back to. By year's end, the Muscovy ducks were the quiet backbone of the garden operation. Low maintenance once the setup was right. Consistent output, 0 noise complaints. The rabbits came in at the end of summer, 2 does and 1 buck to start. New Zealand whites, chosen for their feed-to-meat conversion ratio and their calm temperament. I want to be straightforward about something before I go further. Going into this, rabbits were the animal I was most uncertain about. Not because of the care, but because of the emotional side of raising meat animals at close quarters. If you're someone who named your chickens and found processing them difficult, rabbits will ask something similar of you. I think you should know that going in rather than discovering it mid-experiment. From a self-sufficiency standpoint, though, the numbers are real. A single doe's litter output over the course of a year represents a substantial amount of clean, lean, high-protein meat. No hormones, no supply chain, no guessing about what the animal ate. But here's the part that actually surprised me most, and this became one of the most valuable pieces of the entire year. Rabbit manure is what they call a cold manure. Unlike chicken manure, which is high enough in nitrogen that it can burn plants if you apply it fresh, rabbit manure goes straight from the hutch onto the garden bed. No composting required, no waiting period. I started collecting the droppings from under the ground run every few days and working them into my vegetable beds. I set up 2 identical raised beds side by side. Same soil base, same seeds, same watering schedule. One got rabbit manure, worked in every 2 weeks. The other got my usual compost mix. I wasn't running a controlled lab experiment, so I won't pretend the conditions were perfect. But by midsummer, the difference was visible enough that I photographed it. The tomatoes in the rabbit manure bed were noticeably taller, set fruit earlier, and held up better through a dry stretch we had in July. It built over weeks, not overnight. But by the end of the season, I wasn't going back to the other bed. Now the failure, and this one was entirely on me. In early winter, I lost a litter, 7 kits. The temperature dropped sharply overnight, sharper than the forecast called for, and the nest wasn't insulated adequately. I'd been warned about cold snaps with young rabbits. I hadn't taken it seriously enough. That was a hard morning. When you lose a litter not to predators or disease but to your own preparation gap, it sits differently. I built a proper insulated inner wall for the hutch after that, something I should have done from the beginning. After that fix, the rabbit system ran cleanly for the rest of the year. Low noise, compact footprint, consistent manure output feeding directly into the garden, and meaningful protein contribution to the household. The setup cost was low, and the ongoing costs stayed low. This is one of the most practical small property animals I've ever kept. The goats arrived in early autumn. 2 Nigerian Dwarf does, both around 8 months old. I want to explain why Nigerian Dwarf specifically, because the goat world has a lot of options, and the breed choice genuinely matters. Nigerian Dwarfs are small, 50 to 75 pounds fully grown. That's manageable on a smaller property. They're dual purpose, meaning you get milk and you can breed for meat if you need to. And their milk has a higher butterfat percentage than larger dairy breeds, which makes it better for cheese and butter in small batches. The first job I gave them before I thought about milk at all was land clearing. I had a back section of about 1/4 acre that had gone completely overgrown. Brambles, invasive brush, young saplings I didn't want. I'd been putting it off for 2 seasons. I priced getting it cleared once. A local guy quoted me $350. I fenced off that section, moved the goats in and let them work. Now I want to be honest about what cleared actually means with goats, because I've seen videos that make it sound like 2 goats will turn a jungle into a lawn in a week. That's not what happened here. The soft growth, the brambles, the weeds, the low brush, yes, that was largely gone within 6 weeks. But the woody stems, the thicker stalks, anything more tree than weed, they left most of that alone. I still went in with loppers twice. So it's not a complete solution. It's a significant head start that saved me real money and real hours, and I think that's worth claiming clearly. The failure came around month 4, and it was fully my fault. I gave the goats unsupervised access to a section where I had 2 young apple whips I'd planted the previous spring. I came out one morning to find the bark stripped from one of them in a ring around the base. Girdled, the tree died within 2 weeks. Goats eat bark. This is not a secret, it's in every goat care guide I'd read. I just didn't think they'd moved that far from where they'd been the previous days. That error cost me a tree I'd been tending for a year. Electric netting around any young trees before the goats arrive. Don't wait for the mistake to teach you that. By month 7, both does were in milk, one of them producing enough for daily kitchen use. I started making a simple fresh cheese around month 8. Warm milk, lemon juice, salt, cheesecloth, nothing complicated. But eating cheese made from your own animal, on your own property, from a doe who was clearing your land 6 months earlier, that's a different kind of satisfaction. End of year. The Nigerian dwarf goats were the most complex animal to manage of the 4. They require the most attention, the most fencing discipline, and the most forethought about what's within their reach. But the return, in land management, in daily milk, in the overall richness of the system, made them worth it for this property. The quail came last in mid-autumn, and I want to spend real time here because I genuinely believe Coturnix quail are the most underestimated animal in small-scale homesteading. I'm not sure why they don't get more serious attention. I started with 24 Coturnix quail, a mix of males and females. The cage footprint was roughly 4 feet by 8 feet. I built it myself from materials I already had on the property. Total setup cost was under $40. Coturnix quail begin laying at 6 to 8 weeks old. Not slowly, not inconsistently. They lay nearly every day. Once my hens hit their stride, I was collecting between 16 and 20 eggs per day. That is more egg production per square foot than any other animal I have ever kept. The eggs are small, about 1/3 the size of a chicken egg. But quail eggs carry a strong nutritional profile, and at my local farmers market they sell for 3 to 4 times the price of chicken eggs per dozen. I wasn't planning to sell them, but I had more than I could use, so I tested the market. Most weeks they sold out. A couple of times I came home with a flat or 2. Farmers market sales aren't consistent, and I won't pretend otherwise. But the demand was real and steady enough that I started bringing more each week, and the price held. Quail eggs are still unusual enough in most markets that if you show up with a clean setup and a simple sign, people stop, they ask questions, and most of them buy. Now the failure, and this one I own completely. When I first built the cage, I used a spacing that was fine for adults, but too tight for the early weeks when the birds were still growing. The overcrowding created stress. I lost 6 birds in the first 3 weeks, trampling, stress-related deaths, and 1 respiratory infection that spread quickly in the confined space. I rebuilt the cage with more floor space per bird, added a second feeding station to reduce competition at the feeder, and improved ventilation along the side panels. After that restructuring, I didn't lose another bird for the rest of the year. Once the setup was right, the quail system required about 10 minutes of daily attention. Feed, water, collect eggs. That's the whole routine. No complex health management, no expensive vet calls, no fencing escapes. Quiet enough that you'd almost forget they were there until you went to collect. By year's end, the quail were producing the most consistent and lowest maintenance food output on the entire property. For anyone looking for a starting point, one animal to try before committing to a bigger transition, this is the one I'd point you to first. Before I give you the full year-end numbers, make sure you're subscribed to the Animal and Plant Lost Vault. Next week, I'm releasing a dedicated video on the exact plant systems, the forage crops, the feed plants, the soil builders that I built around these 4 animals to cut feed costs even further. It goes deep and it connects directly to everything I've covered today. Subscribe, hit the bell, and you'll see it the moment it drops. When I was keeping 14 chickens, my monthly feed spend averaged between $40 and $50. That's before factoring in coop repairs, predator losses, and the vet costs from the respiratory outbreak in year 3. The total honest annual cost of keeping chickens was closer to $800 in my worst year. This year, across all 4 animals, my total feed spend was lower, significantly lower. The ducks and rabbits foraged and supplemented heavily. The quail ate almost nothing relative to their output. The goats' diet was largely what the land provided during the clearing season, with supplemental hay through winter. But more important than the cost was the output diversity. With chickens, I had eggs and occasionally a bird for the pot. That was it. This year I had duck eggs, rabbit meat, fresh goat milk and cheese, quail eggs for daily use and market sales, meaningfully improved soil fertility in every garden bed, active pest management in the garden, and a 1/4 acre of cleared land that is ready for a new planting section in spring. That's not a comparison. That's a different category of self-sufficient living. Here's what the numbers don't tell you though. This system asks more of you than chickens did. Each animal has its own rhythm, its own needs, its own way of testing your attention. If you want something you can mostly leave alone between morning and evening chores. Chickens are genuinely easier if you want a setup that pulls more from your land and build something that compounds over time. This is worth the extra thought. Only you know which of those describes where you are right now. If I could go back and do year 1 differently, here's what I'd change. Start with the quail first, before anything else. They're the lowest risk, the fastest return, the smallest footprint, and the easiest confidence builder if you're transitioning away from a familiar animal. If you've only ever kept chickens and you want to expand, Coturnix quail are the bridge. Build the duck water setup before the ducks arrive. I improvised for the first 3 weeks and it cost me time and unnecessary stress. Whatever water system you think you need, make it slightly bigger and have it ready before the animals come home. Do your fencing audit before the goats arrive, not after. Walk your entire boundary, get down low and look for gaps. Test every latch. Goats don't wait for you to be ready, and they will find the one weakness you missed. And know your climate before you commit to any specific animal. The setup that worked here, this region, this season pattern, this land size, may not translate directly to your situation. The principles transfer, the specifics need adapting. Research your zone before you invest. The question I get most often when people hear about this transition is some version of, do you miss the chickens? Honestly, no. But I understand why I kept them for so long. They were familiar. They were what every resource pointed me toward. And there's real comfort in doing what everyone else is doing, because at least when something goes wrong, there's a community of people who've had the same problem. What I had to accept was that comfort and optimization are not the same thing. My chickens were comfortable. This system is better. For the land, for my food supply, and for what I'm actually trying to build here. That's the year. All of it. The good mornings, the cold snap, the escaped duck, the girdled apple tree, the quail eggs that sold at the farmer's market, and the 2 flats I brought back home. The full picture. If anything in this video is already making you think differently about your setup, even just one animal, one idea worth testing, drop a comment and tell me where you are right now. Still on chickens, thinking about switching, already running something like this. I read those comments and they helped me know what to cover next. This is the Animal and Plant Lost Vault, where we find what's been overlooked and put it to work. I'll see you in the next one.